I was 5 years old when my father first told me about the myth of white butterflies. We were living in Illinois, well outside of Chicago, and my grandmother had just died. I was very close to her and was barely able to get my mind around the idea that she was gone and never coming back. I was standing in our backyard, my parents in the house talking about funeral arrangements, watching the tall grass that seemed to stretch out forever behind that house. All around the tall blades were dozens and dozens of little white butterflies. I had always liked the white butterflies. They comforted me somehow. They vanished in the winter in those days when the Midwest was my home, but they came back in the spring and thrived during the summer. I loved seeing them and imagined that they responded to my whims. I would wave my hand and pretend that they would respond to my gestures. I'd been crying. I held out my hand and a single white butterfly detached from a tall blade of grass and flitted to my palm. It landed briefly, like a kiss, and then flew away. I didn't even hear my dad come up behind me. "Do you know what they say about white butterflies?" he asked. There was an odd sound to his voice. He normally had a deep, booming voice, but now it was pinched and sounded choked as if he had a cold. This grandmother was my father's mother, and he had been crying. "No," I said, moving so that I was snuggled up against him, but not taking my eyes off the mass of white wings. "They say that white butterflies are the souls of your loved ones that have died," my dad said. "That they send you messages and are there to let you know that they can still see you, still care about you." I thought about that for a moment. The sun was going down, the clouds were an amazing pink and orange. The butterflies flitted and fluttered, and I wondered if one of them was my grandmother. "Is Grandmama a butterfly?" I asked. "Yeah," Dad said. "I think she is." "Like angels," I said quietly. "What?" "They're like angels," I repeated. "Yeah, I guess they are." I never looked at little white butterflies the same way again, even as I got older and wiser and realized that the things parents say to their young children were meant to comfort them and not to present reality. I still held to that belief. I held on to it strongly when, at the age of 14, my father died. It happened fast. I wasn't even home. I was coming home from school, and when I arrived at the house, there were police cars and an ambulance was pulling away. My mother was standing in the driveway, and her hands were up over her face. I ran to her, and she swept me into her arms. "Angelica!" she called when she saw me. "Oh, Angelica." Dad had been walking home, like he always did, from the train station after another long day at work in the city. When he got to the walkway that led up to the house, he suddenly grabbed his chest and collapsed. I found out later that he was dead before he hit the ground. Mom and I were in trouble. Dad worked, but he was not wealthy. The house had been mortgaged twice, and Mom's secretarial job was not enough to pay for the land and the food and everything else. That meant something that terrified me even at the cynical age of 14. It meant we would have to go live with my other grandmother in Mississippi. I did not like the woman. She was tall, with a wild mane of curly white hair that made her dark skin appear even darker. She was darker than me, like a shadow or a void, and she had a fierce face that always looked like she had sucked on a lemon. She ran a boarding house that looked like every haunted house you've ever seen in a haunted house movie, and the place was filled by strange old women who were just as creepy and weird as Grandma Francine. And then there were the legends. The town where they lived was full of rumors that my grandmother was a witch. More to the point that she was a hoodoo witch, and that she could make your head explode by planting a jar with various objects in it in your own front yard. The idea was that you stepped over it, and several steps later, your head exploded. I knew all of that was likely crap, but there were times when I looked into that dark, craggy face and wondered. Now we were going to live with her. Grandma Francine had been wanting that for some time, but my dad had refused, insisting on living near Chicago. Now Grandma Francine was finally getting her way. I was not happy. I was sad, angry, and unhappy. So I stood in my field and watched the butterflies one night, not long after the funeral, and held out my hand. The butterflies responded. Dozens of them appeared, and they made their way across the grass to my hand. I watched them as they flitted and floated around me, and it was like being lost in a cloud. I could barely hear the whisper of their wings, feel the soft kiss of those wings against my cheek, as if trying to dry my tears. One of them landed right on my nose, and I could see the delicate white wings and the black dots on each of them. I thought of my dad's dark eyes. 2 weeks later, we were moving to Mississippi and into my grandmother's home. My grandmother stood outside the house and smiled as we pulled up with the U-Haul trailer in tow. The many old women inside the home came pouring out and smiled and laughed and pinched my cheeks and gave me kisses as if we were old friends. They smelled like mothballs and disinfectants, and I just wanted to find my room and hide. I hid for about 3 days. On day 3, my grandmother appeared at my door. I opened the door and stepped back, sitting on the edge of my bed as she strode through. She seemed impossibly tall, like her head would scrape the ceiling. "Hello, Angelica," she said, looking around the room, which had clothes scattered about and looked a mess. "I just wanted to see how you were adjusting." "Hi, Grandma," I said, looking down at my shoes. "I'm okay." "Don't lie to me, girl," Grandma replied. "You're up here wallowing in your sorrow. I can understand that. It happens and people mourn in different ways, but you need to ask yourself if that is how your father would want you to spend the rest of your life." I looked up at her gray eyes and marveled at the mane of gray curly hair around her head. Her face hung down, and it was like looking into time itself. "I don't want to be here," I said, the anger I felt at being here so sudden and violent that the words flew out of my mouth before I could react. "I don't want to be here with you or those crazy women." "Oh, I know it, child," Grandma said, her eyebrows raising. "I know a lot of things, but there are a lot of things you do not know. It's best that you are here because there are things about this family that you should know. You're of age now that you need to know these things. You have power, Angelica, but I don't think you know how powerful you are. The women in our family all have power, you know." I shook my head. "You're crazy. I always knew you were crazy." "I may be, child," Grandma said, not looking angry at all. "But you'll understand what I mean in time. However, for right now, how about you follow me, and I'll show you something that'll at least make you feel a little more at home." She held out her hand, the long fingers tipped with very long nails that were so thin and almost translucent, but meticulously filed into points. I looked at her, certain that she was loonier than a wet hen and was about to throw me into an oven to serve to the rest of the crazy old women for dinner. However, I could almost hear her voice in my head, encouraging me, enticing me. I let her hand fold over mine. We walked through the house. The place was filled with all kinds of furniture from various centuries and of all makes and models. It had a haphazard feel to it due to all of the clutter. I could hear the old women chatting and laughing in the front parlor, and my mother was talking to someone on the phone in the kitchen. We walked past all of that and out the back door. The lawn was meticulously mowed back there. It stretched back about 100 yards, and there were thick trees beyond that. A path that turned from cement to dirt carried us through the trees. Grandma seemed almost to float, as if the rough ground beneath her feet did not bother her at all. We walked through the trees, the darkness covering us beneath those branches, and then emerged into bright sunlight. It was a massive clearing, and it sparkled as if sprinkled with gold and diamonds. Tall grass and other plants that I did not recognize were everywhere. I gasped. It reminded me of the field at home. "Watch this," Grandma said. She clapped her hands. Hundreds of white butterflies flew from the grass, from the plants that I did not know, and flew around and around. It was like a tornado of white butterflies, and they flew around us, landed on us, brushed against us. "They're not what you think," Grandma said, holding out her long fingers as several butterflies landed on them. "This is your power, you know. This is what you can do naturally. The rest you'll have to learn." "What are you talking about?" I asked, delighted as they flew around me and landed on my head, sticking to my clothes. "You'll learn in time," Grandma said. "You'll understand soon and everything will change. Just remember, the butterflies are not as they seem. You can control them, and they can be powerful. Remember that." I had no idea what my grandmother was talking about. She was old, and I thought she was a loony, so that was just more crazy old person talk. I had things to worry about that didn't involve her, but I appreciated the effort she had put into showing me that field, and that my white butterflies, my nice grandma, and my dad were not so far away. I had a new school to attend. That did not go well. When you were the granddaughter of a woman that residents thought was a witch and could kill them with a look, a buried totem, or some other kind of spell, the kids tended to give you a wide berth. I spent many a day sitting alone in the cafeteria at lunchtime. I didn't care. I was lost in confusion and sadness. This new culture was so foreign to me. I was not raised a Southern belle, and the conservative ways of the South got to me fast. Although there were laws in place that were supposed to eliminate the racism of the region, it was still practiced rather openly at times. My mom was so busy helping out around the boarding house and then finding a job of her own, while also dealing with the powerful emotions of losing her husband, that she was barely there. I spent a lot of time in my room crying. When that wasn't enough, I spent time in the field with the butterflies. They were always there. They always came to me. I was almost always alone. I avoided my grandmother and the women in the boarding house. They talked in whispers when I was around, and everywhere I turned, I felt like an outsider. I only felt at home when I was in that field. More and more, as the days got hotter, I would spend the afternoons there. I swear I could hear those butterflies whispering to me, telling me it was okay, that I was not alone. Then came the day when everything changed. I was still the outsider, but life had fallen into a steady routine. I went to school, I came home and did my homework in a rush, and then ran off to my field not far from the Yazoo River. I would be there until dinner and then come back inside. I would then retire to my room and read or listen to music until it was time for bed. It was an isolated existence, but one I had grown accustomed to. I ran to the field that afternoon, and it was hot and gorgeous. I was wearing a tank top, shorts, and flip-flops to keep cool. As I ran under the trees, the immediate coolness of that canopy sent goosebumps up my arm. I ran into the tall grass and shrubbery that was beyond with a smile on my face, the plants brushing against my skin, and I extended my arms and closed my eyes and ran, feeling the tips of the blades of grass brushing against them. "Come to me!" I yelled. I still had my eyes closed and ran into the middle of this vast expanse. When I opened my eyes, it was like being in the middle of a cloud. There were so many of the white butterflies around me. And then I stopped cold. I was not alone in the field. A man stood there. He was not particularly tall, but he was taller than me. His skin was as dark as night, and his eyes were wide and white. He was smiling, and it seemed as if he had row upon row of white teeth. He had thick, muscular arms and was wearing what looked like a black suit over his well-built frame. He also wore a black fedora on his head, which he had doffed as he bowed toward me. "I'm sorry to spoil your reverie, my dear," he said in a voice that was like a marshmallow dipped in honey. It flowed from him and rolled over me like a warm wave. My fear and surprise seemed to melt in an instant. "I have seen you running in this field many times, and I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Inu Wakesa. I wanted to welcome you to Yazoo. A million thoughts flew through my head at once. My mother had always told me not to talk to strangers, and this man was the very definition of strange. At the same time, there was something about his voice, something about him that made me feel okay. "Hello," I heard myself saying. I was lost in his eyes, which were dark pools, but seemed to change color as I moved, or he moved, or the sunlight moved behind clouds. "I'm Angelica." "Oh, I know it," Inu said. "I know your grandmother, too. I knew you were her granddaughter the moment I saw you." That struck me as strange, that he knew my grandmother. He was so young, his face unlined. How could he know Grandma? "How do you know Grandma?" I asked, my voice not sounding like my own, but distant. "She's so old and you're so young." Inu threw his head back and laughed a big, deep, rich laugh. It seemed to fill the meadow, and I could swear I felt it beneath my feet, as if the base of it were shaking the ground. "Thank you for that," Inu said. "I'm not as young as I look. Do you like the butterflies?" I could not look away from his eyes now, and now, deep within the darkness of his pupils, I could see color. There was fire deep within him. I could almost smell the smoke coming off of him, from his breath, which also smelt a bit like rotten eggs. Not much, but a little, as if he had eaten an egg sandwich. "Did you eat an egg sandwich?" I heard myself asking, and I wondered how much of my thoughts I had said aloud. Then I wondered if it didn't matter, because now there felt like little fingers inside my brain, working around and rooting around, searching for things. I tried to look away from his eyes, from his face, but my head would not listen to my brain. "No, my sweet angel," Inu said. "It just comes with the territory, my territory. Anyway, I've been looking for your grandmother for a long time, searching high and low for her. Then I found you, and I just knew. I just could smell her on you, as it were. We all leave a smell, you know, and each of us leaves a different one. Your grandmother's is very unique." I felt my head nodding at this. I was now swaying, as if his voice were music. Sure, nice music. Fire. There was no fire or smoke in this man. No smell of rotten eggs. What had I been thinking? This was a nice man. A friend. "That's right, Angel," Inu said. "I'm your friend. In fact, I'm such a good friend that I'd like to take you home with me. I can show you some amazing tricks. You know, like magic that you can show your grandmother later. She'd like that." "Yeah," I heard myself saying. "She would." I took a step toward him. I extended my hand and he smiled a wide smile. I couldn't stop myself. Some part of my brain knew that something was wrong and that this strange man was doing something to my mind, but I couldn't stop. "Angelica." The voice ripped through my head like a spike. I suddenly staggered. My hand went up to my head. Inu's smile faded, and for an instant, his entire face and demeanor changed. His smile was now too wide and filled with daggers for teeth. So many daggers. His face was too small to hold so many huge teeth, but his jaw seemed to distend and change. Inu's back legs suddenly looked hairy and backwards, as if his knees were bending the wrong way. Inu's entire face looked longer, his eyes blazing red, hair sprouting on his arms and across his neck. Inu's face became a mask of rage, and he looked up into the sky. "Get out of here," he called. "Get out of here. This is between me and her." "Angelica, snap out of it. He is not your friend. Fight him. Fight him. Use your power." My grandmother's voice was so loud I thought my head might explode. I could see her. I could see her standing in her kitchen, her hands on the counter, eyes closed. She was thinking to me. "He's too strong, Grandma. Help me. I don't have any power." "Get away," Inu screamed. He had changed back now to the handsome man that he had appeared as when I first saw him. "She's mine now, you old cow." "Yes, Listen to me. Your power is all around you. It always has been. Now feel it. Release it. Just then, I felt something inside my head. It was like a switch was thrown, and I felt something like electricity flowing through my body. Inu, meanwhile, now towered over me. His face was changing back and forth from the handsome man to the fearsome creature that he really was. He had opened that distended mouth with all of the daggers for teeth and was bending down toward me. Then he stopped. "What is this?" he asked. "What has happened to your eyes?" I said nothing. I just extended both hands out to my sides. And the butterflies responded. Thousands upon thousands of them appeared from the clearing, so many that they clouded the sky and it got much darker. Inu screamed and staggered back. I held my hands high, and the white butterflies swirled around me like a tornado. I let them, and then I flung my hands forward, and the tornado of white wings encircled the beast in front of me. Inu let out a huge scream, and I smelled the brimstone. The ground shook, and suddenly the meadow had a hill in the middle of it, where there hadn't been one before. "See them for what they are, girl. Call upon them." And I did. The white butterflies. There were some actual butterflies in the cloud, but most of them were not actually white butterflies. They appeared as such to my mind until I was ready. Now I could see them for what they really were. They were souls. The souls of my family, the souls of my ancestors. I could see them now, flying around Inu, reaching out with ghostly hands and tearing at him, tearing apart his flesh, tearing apart the mask that he wore and showing the true demonic beast within, just like my father had told me all of those years ago. And then I saw my dad. He stepped out of the tornado for just a moment and smiled at me. I could feel the warmth from him. I could feel the love. "I'm always here with you," I heard him say. "I always will be." And then he was swept up into the white tornado that was whirling with great intensity. I could feel my hair being blown back from my forehead with the speed of it. Then there was a great burst of flame from within. A sound like 1,000 thunderclaps followed, and the entire white tornado was blown apart, scattered, the souls becoming white butterflies again. I was thrown backwards and landed hard on my butt several yards away. When I got back to my feet, there was the smell of burnt grass and brimstone. The hill in the middle of the field was still there, and there was a large burned spot where Inu had been standing. I felt sick and spent several minutes vomiting into the grass. When I got back up, the butterflies were there. I held out my hand, and they fluttered around me, kissing me. I could hear them now, the voices of my ancestors going back centuries. They told me I was loved, that I was special, and that they were there to protect me. Then the white butterfly with the dark spots in its wings landed on my nose again. I smiled. "I love you, Daddy," I whispered. It flew away, as did the rest. I was alone. I came back home, and my grandmother was waiting in my room. She sat on my bed. There was a smile on her face. I came in and closed the door behind me, dragged a chair across the room, and sat down in front of her. "So?" I asked. "I think you have things to tell me?" Grandma gave a slight nod. "We are witches, Angelica. The women in our family have been masters of what is known, in this time and in this land, as hoodoo. It is an old religion and belief, but only select people can wield the true power of it. Yes, it involves spells and potions, but those of us with the true power have something else. We can summon the dead," I said. Grandma shook her head. "You can summon the dead. They appear to you as white butterflies, but you know what they are now. You can reach back along our bloodline as far back as the first and summon every ancestor to you. They protect you, but each of us has a different innate ability. Me, I can read minds and cast my own thoughts, as you now know." I agreed. "Yes, what about Mom?" "Her powers are weaker, and she never wanted to learn how to cast spells. She ran away with your father and tried to get away from this life. Her innate power involves moving things with her mind. As I said, she never developed it, so she cannot lift much, but she can move little things. I nodded again. I could remember a vision when I was very young, my mother standing at the stove and kneaded the pepper that was at the other end of the kitchen counter. I saw her extending her hand and that pepper shaker sliding across and into her grasp. "Your father knew," Grandma Francine confided. "He actually tried to encourage your mother to stay here and learn, but your mother was insistent. You see, because the women in our line are so powerful, our lives are inherently fraught with danger. You've seen one of them today." "Who was he?" "A demon. Inu has sought to control me and steal my powers for a long time now. I have fought him many times. The women here at this home also have abilities. They are, perhaps, not as powerful as I, but together we cast spells that attempted to hide me, your mother, and especially you. Our spells weaken over time. I have begun to weaken because of age. He was able to find you and sense me on you. He is not the last of those who would try to kill me or steal my power, and he is far, far from the most powerful." "Is he dead?" Grandma smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I fear not, child. He was sent away, overwhelmed, but he is not going to stay gone forever." There was silence for a while as I digested this. My head was spinning, but it also felt right. "What now?" I asked. "That depends on you. You see, your power rivals mine. I'm the most powerful hoodoo witch that has been here for centuries. That power passed over your mother, but has found a seat in you. You can learn to use that power and accept the dangers that come with it, or you can reject it as your mother has. However, I must warn you, just because you reject it does not mean the danger will leave you." I thought about this for a moment. I had one last question. "Did you kill my dad?" I asked. "To get me back here, did you use some kind of spell to kill him?" I had expected this to offend my grandma, but her face was unchanged. I guess she had read the question in my mind long before I spoke. "No, child. I don't know if magic was used to kill your father, or if it was just his heart. As I said, our lives have an inherent danger, and that gets passed to those around us. It is a curse. It was not I, however. Your mother loved him, and I had accepted her choice even before you were born." I watched her face. Outside my window, a single white butterfly fluttered against the glass. Grandma remained impassive, watching me. So much to learn, I thought. But if there were more like Inu out there, I would pay attention to what this crazy old lady was telling me to learn, to be ready, and maybe find out if something had been behind my dad's untimely death. "I'm in," I said. I extended my hand. Grandma smiled and nodded, really a kind of bow, and she covered my hand with her own. Her skin felt like a crepe paper streamer resting on my hand. Her bones felt thin enough to break. "Then let's get started," she said, leading me to the conservatory downstairs and toward the back of the house. As we walked into the metal and glass room, I noticed how each of the plants were carefully labeled, and the many glass jars had dusty lids with labels faded from the sun. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that there were animal parts and bones in some of the jars. Rabbit ears, frog legs, and fully skeletonized squirrels, all clearly visible on a shelf. "We'll do our cooking lessons out here while your mother does her magic in the kitchen," Grandma Francine said, laughing as she reached for an old white marble mortar and pestle and placed them on the large harvest table in the middle of the room. I looked back into the kitchen and could see my mom watching them while she sprinkled and stirred spices into a large pot. She looked a little worried and tired, but smiled approvingly when I caught her eye, and nodded and gestured for me to look at my grandmother and pay attention. It may not be the life she and my dad wanted for me, but with those gestures she was conceding that this is the life for which I was destined. Something tells me the world may be hearing more from Angelica in the coming years, provided she continues to learn, to practice, and harness her abilities. Of course, the darkness will always be there, around the edges. That's what happens when you live in a world where, perhaps more often than for regular people, the darkness is alive when the night comes out. You've been listening to When the Night Comes Out, a weekly horror anthology podcast with stories by Bryan W. Alaspa and narrated by Allie James. For Bryan's work, visit his website at www.bryanwalaspa.com or visit amazon.com for his books of fiction and nonfiction. Be sure to listen to Allie's work on Facebook at Allie James Projects.